beginning, I was raised by Christian parents who are sitting right over here. And I even though I was raised in a Christian home, when I got to the age where I could choose for myself, I chose not God. I chose to walk in the ways of the world. That didn't get me very far. And just like so many people in the world, I just was empty, regardless of what I was pursuing, regardless of the things that I sought after. I always, when I got what I was looking for, it always left me empty. And that emptiness led me to search for answers to see if what I'd been told as a kid was true. Because if it's not, I don't want to buy into something that's false. And I came upon a book from C.S. Lewis. You guys probably heard the name before. And as I was reading it, I came upon this sentence that it hit my exact situation. He says, "If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." And when I read that, I just knew, that was God's confirmation that, everything that I sought after was vanity. It was meaningless. And reading that book, it got me to start reading the Bible, because I hadn't read the Bible at that point. And things started to progress as I read the Bible. I started to grow. I started to get plugged into the local church in Simi Valley. And I remember there was a turning point in my relationship with my new relationship with God. And it was when I was reading through Luke. I came across Luke 9:62. It says, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." And when I read that, I felt so much fear. But it was the first time in my life that I felt fear and joy at the same time. Fear because I had no idea what God was going to do with my life, but I knew that my life wasn't my own anymore. And so reading that, I just I had to put my Bible down and just was kind of in shock. And just feeling this sense of fear of handing my life over to God for Him to do whatever He wanted with it. I'm sure many of you have experienced the same thing, and it's hard to do. But when I actually did that, it was the most freeing feeling that I've ever had. And so, having given my life to the Lord, I didn't know what that was going to mean. And then things progressed, and I remember there was one certain Sunday at church. The church that I went to was broken up to where there would be 2 services in the morning and 1 at night. And I remember my parents went to the morning service that day, and I was going to the night service. And my mom told me that my dad said jokingly, "We shouldn't let Matt go to the service because he's going to want to become a missionary." Sure enough, I went to the service, and there was a missionary from Papua New Guinea that came to speak. And my concept of missionary at this point was very limited. It was pretty much that all missionaries go to Africa. They all come down with malaria or something like that, and people send them money because they feel bad for them. And that's their existence. And it wasn't too appealing to me. Never thought too much about it. But this guy came, and he is working with an unreached tribe, a previously unreached tribe in Papua New Guinea. And he broke down for us from start to finish the process of sharing the gospel with a people group that's never heard before. He had to go in and learn the language. language that they didn't have before so that he could translate the scriptures. And just this whole process of God moving through this culture that had never heard the gospel before. And it was so exciting to me. And he told a story of the first members of this tribe to accept the gospel. And there was so much opposition to it. There were members of the tribe standing there in the river that they were about to baptize them in with spears, saying, "You better not do this, or else you're gonna pay for this." And they would do it anyways. And the boldness and just seeing God move in this remote jungle area that I'd never even knew existed. It seems something that started with a group of 12 guys in Israel is going to every part of the world. And I just got so excited. It seemed, being a missionary wasn't just, boring life in malaria and waiting for people to send you money out of pity. It was something exciting, and it's like Josh talked about, seeing God's story throughout the Bible, being able to enter into that was something that really started becoming interesting to me. And so, to make a really long story short, which I don't have time to tell right now, I went to Sweden on an internship to assist the long-term missionary there. And little did I know that this guy worked in a Muslim community within Sweden. I went there just to share the gospel with the Swedes, and instead God gave me, 70,000 Arabs to live with. It was great, and that trip really excited me about missions, and it gave me a taste of what it would be like, and I learned so much from the missionary that I worked with. And what God really did on that trip is open up my eyes to the unreached people of the world. Because my conclusion of that trip was that Sweden is a place that, for the most part, is reached by the gospel. The majority of people aren't Christians, but they've had the gospel, most of them, and have chosen to reject it. And so my conclusion was that I wanted to, I guess you'd say, adopt or choose a people group that had never heard before to go to. And as soon as I got back, I started researching, seeing where's the biggest need. And there's a book called Operation World. And it has, I brought a copy of it if you guys want to look at it afterwards, but it has every single nation in the world in it, and statistics as to what the gospel is doing there, and what are the prayer needs for each nation. And so I could look at that thing for hours on end without being bored. And I originally thought, okay, India, I'm going to go to India. And even when I came to Antioch, I still thought I was going to India. And but then I didn't have a peace about choosing a place and sticking with it, because there were so many needs in the world. And it was kind of overwhelming to think about this. There's the millions and millions and millions of people that don't know Christ. And I was studying Hindi for a while, and I was thinking about India, where I would live in India. I was talking to organizations, and God kind of shook my plans up a little bit. And then I started thinking, okay, I work with Muslims. Should I go to the Middle East? Should I go to Indonesia? And it was kind of maddening, actually, not knowing where, because I knew that he wanted me to be a missionary, but as to where was kind of a mystery, and I was getting frustrated. And that's when I came to Antioch at that point, and I was trying to figure out where. And so just one day, out of my own curiosity, having nothing to do with missions, or so I thought, I read this book. It's about the atomic bombing in Japan. It's a journalist's account of what happened, and individual people's lives that were affected by it. And I just read it for my own interest. And there's a story in here of a Japanese woman whose life is just filled with suffering from this atomic bomb, and her life, she's just bedridden for the rest of her life, miserable. And there's this missionary that keeps trying to share the gospel with her. but she keeps pushing it away. How can a good God allow such evil in this world? And no, she just kept rejecting it. And it was kind of a weird situation because this lady is probably dead already. But I started like praying for her when I was reading this. I don't even know if that makes sense. But the next page, she accepts the gospel and becomes a Christian. And I was so moved when I read that. And this book, it caused me to put Japan on my list as a possible place. And I started to research what Japan was like. What's the situation there? What is the gospel doing there? And the statistics that I found were pretty horrifying. In Operation World, it says that Japan is the largest unevangelized nation on earth that is completely open to missionaries. And the biggest need there is long-term missionaries because the culture is so complicated that a short-term trip, you can't even crack the surface of it. And so long-term is something that I was willing to do. And I also read that Japan is less than 0.5% evangelical Christian. And that means that 99.5% of over 99.5% of the Japanese don't know Jesus Christ. And I don't know if that registers with you guys, but that's terrible. That's pretty much the whole nation of Japan that's going to hell. And like Josh talked about, it's a responsibility of the church. I don't know why Jesus doesn't just write it in the sky, like, this is what you need to know. He uses us. And why he chooses to do that sometimes doesn't make sense, but he does, and so it's our responsibility. And so I wrestled with that for a while. Is Japan the place I should go? Because I had this long list of places, and I was unsure. The deciding factor for me was that Japan has an incredible potential to be a sending nation. If you look at South Korea right now, it's a small nation of 45 million people, and they send more missionaries than any other country in the world. And they've been such a blessing to the nations, like Josh mentioned. And just Japan has, over 100 million people, and they have incredible material wealth that God's blessed them with. So if God grabs a hold of their hearts, they can just start sending people to all the parts of the world. And so my passion for these unreached countries can be even fulfilled through reaching the Japanese and sending them out also to be a blessing. And once I chose Japan, God, little by little, started confirming to me that it was the right choice and that it was what he had for me. One of them was meeting Cecil, having a guy that's there that has been in Japan as a missionary to mentor me, walk me through the process. He led me to an organization that I've been talking to, and he even set up a situation where I'm going to be getting my bachelor's degree finished at Cal State Long Beach, but at the same time being involved in the Japanese outreach on campus and getting my training done for the mission field while I'm going to school. That's extremely rare. I've never heard of that before. And just seeing God's love for me and wanting me to be prepared and just confirming over and over and over that this is what he has for me. And so the first step with this organization, they told me, is that I need to go there and see Japan firsthand and meet the missionary team that's there, encourage them, learn from them, get advice from them, learn how I can prepare better, and just seek God's will as to how this process is going to take place and what is God's will for me in Japan. And so that'll be this summer in June. I'll be going for 3 weeks, and Josh will, Lord willing, be joining me for the last week and a half. I always laugh to myself when I think of Josh in Japan. I'm going to be lost already, and Josh is going to be even more lost. And told me he's claustrophobic, so I made sure that I'm going to book a capsule hotel. Or we're going to sleep in a closet. Anyways, I'm really excited for that. And so right now the process that we're going through is support raising for that. And so after this short-term trip, the long-term plans would be, get my bachelor's degree done, prepare like crazy, and raise long-term support and go back, for as long as God has me there. And I just get so excited when I think of, it's kind of the same feeling of, the verse about putting your hand to the plows. I have no idea what God has in store. I do, but I don't. And it's just that feeling of letting go, letting God take over. And because I have no idea what's going to happen in Japan. I don't know how many people are going to be led to the Lord through me. But I do know that God's going to be with me, forever. And that the gates of hell aren't going to stand against his church. So, yeah, and just thinking of Japan, and I always use the words, if God grabs a hold of Japan, then blah, blah, blah. But it's when. Because it says every knee is going to bow.